Good evening, my dear friends. I welcome you all to the Hindu and the Businessline editorial analysis on July 15, 2022. The Securities Exchange Board of India, which is the regulator of securities market or the capital markets in India, has released recently a consultative paper on prohibition of insider trading regulations on mutual funds. The Franklin Templeton case, where insider trading defrauded the general public and was cornered by some insiders who had information on the unpublished price sensitive information, which made them exit out of the schemes of the Franklin Templeton way ahead of the crash of the mutual fund scheme. Friends, the price sensitive information in mutual funds helps those who have a knowledge of it before the release of the units of the mutual funds. They will cash in on of the unpublished price sensitive information which is known beforehand before the public investors who get to know about it. In order to prevent this unpublished price sensitive information misuse by the insiders of the mutual funds, the Securities Exchange Board of India, who is the regulator of capital markets and which helps in the development of the capital markets. The SEBI's role is to protect the interest of the investors. The mutual funds are those funds which take public money into the schemes floated by them. Hence, the mutual funds are regulated by the Stock Exchange Board of India, Securities Exchange Board of India, that is SEBI. So, prohibition of insider trading prohibits the insider trading in mutual funds. The insider trading means the AMC employees, the asset management company which is managing the mutual funds, the employees of the AMC, and those connected persons are having unpublished price sensitive information which will influence the price of the units of the mutual funds, the NAV, the net asset value of the mutual funds units. And having this information beforehand ahead of the public investors, they will manipulate it. In order to prevent this practice, the prohibition of insider trading on mutual funds is being brought about by the Securities Exchange Board of India. What are those price sensitive information which is not disclosed and which is manipulated by the insiders? There are redemption pressures, that is, the mutual funds will not be able to redeem the units when once demanded by the investors. Then liquidity issues means there is not enough cash in hand to repay the or redeem the mutual funds to the investors. Then there is NAV write down. NAV write down means net asset value. The asset value, just like a share, in mutual funds we have a net asset value. The value of the unit is termed as net asset value. The net asset value write down means putting the value down. These are, and some exit of certain fund managers. There are fund managers who are handling the mutual funds units. The exit of the fund managers also influences the net asset value of the units of the mutual funds. So, Securities Exchange Board of India has put a tag on this or ban on this insider trading sharing of information so that the protection of the interest of the investors is ensured. The investors do not know this information beforehand. So, the Securities Exchange Board of India has brought two regulations to prevent this. One, there should be a closure period at least 1 month before this unpublished price sensitive information is going to happen. So, the next one is the SEBI has broadened the scope of insiders. Insiders means those who are having access to this unpublished price sensitive information, has extended the scope of the connected persons to the trustees and managers of the AMCs, that is asset management companies, the auditors, the legal advisors, the association of mutual fund institutions, the registrars of the mutual funds. All these persons are coming within the connected persons. The SEBI has further extended to include those who are having just proximity to the insiders of the mutual funds AMCs just 2 months before the price sensitive information is going to happen. Those are also covered. This has to be reduced. Their share has to be reduced. The regulation should not be extended to such an extent that the stringent norms are just choking the future or the development of the mutual funds. The Securities Exchange Board of India has to remember that the development of the securities market is also its objective. Hence, in order to protect the development of the stock exchange and the securities market, such a regulation should not be made mandatory, which will just prohibit the development of the stock exchange mechanism. Hence, the consultative paper has to be analyzed. The investors can express their opinions on this consultative paper. Hence, there is time for investors to express their opinion on this consultative paper. However, the fine balance between the protection of the investors and the misuse of the information by the connected persons is amply brought in with the consultative paper on the unpublished price sensitive information prohibition, that is prohibition regulations of the insider trading in mutual funds. The prohibition trading has to be stopped so that the Franklin Templeton case never repeats again and again. Then, the 5 years on, the GST's objectives are more or less being achieved. 5 years on, initially when the GST was brought in, the goods and service tax, the good and simple tax, which was brought in, wanted to rationalize the rates. However, on the basis of the ability to pay, 5 rates were introduced. Now looking back, the 5 rates have been more or less changed nowadays, and rationalization process is still evolving. The revenue neutral status was the objective behind the GST's introduction. Revenue neutral position means the states who opted for all the states opted for the GST, and the promise given to them was the revenue neutralization. That is, they would be compensated. Earlier, the states were charging value-added tax. When the change to GST happened, some states, that is the manufacturing states, stood to lose some of their revenues because they stood to lose of the revenues of value-added tax on the retail sale and the wholesale sale of the products. So, a promise was given to them to compensate them. So, this revenue neutralization is more or less happening. However, the 14% mark of the GST growth, which is being stated in the policy, has to be changed to 5%. A 5% here or there, or above or below the growth of the GST, has to be considered for compensation. There was a very strange aspect of GDP growth of 1 to 2%, which was envisaged by the model on GST law. However, the GDP is growing at a very lesser pace when GST growth is taken into consideration. There is no very confirming evidence suggesting that this has made the GST growth. The inflation is influencing the prices of the goods, and with the increase in the consumption, already the consumption is contributing to the GDP growth, and which is having another aspect of inflation influence. Then it was aimed that this rate rationalization process of introducing GST would bring down the prices of commodities, thereby taming the inflation. However, it must be seen that where recently the GST Council has increased the rates of tax on certain products, which has brought the price increase in such products, therefore, which will still have influence on inflation. Then there is the case of reducing the rates of taxes on certain products. However, the manufacturers have not passed on the effect of such rates reduction on the consumers. They cite that the inputs are absorbing the rate decreases. It is very difficult to find which inputs are absorbing the rate decreases unless it is further analyzed, spending lots of time on this. Then it was aimed that the GST would put an end to the rate collections of GST difficulty and will increase revenue of the states, which is partly true, because in order to claim the input tax is the tax on purchases which is being claimed as set off against the tax on sales or turnover. At every point of purchases, the uploading of the invoices and the uploading of the details of the invoices is happening. So it has ensured a seamless smoothening of the process of revenue collection, because the transparency across the uploading of the invoice figures ensures that tax collections are at a very high pace. Then what matter seems to be considered is that including the petroleum in the GST arena. Including petroleum in the GST arena requires that who has to sacrifice? The states or the center? Already the collections on this front is 7.8 trillion rupees in 2022 financial year. It was 6.47 trillion rupees in financial year 2021, and it was 5.08 trillion rupees in financial year 2020. So, bringing the crude oil prices in the GST net, to begin with, a 70% GST has to be introduced, so that a systematic process will be ensured and the transparency will be ensured in this sector. All the ambiguities means the darkness surrounding the GST, the GST mechanism on petroleum will be removed if it is brought within the GST fold. Then we talk about Abenomics. Recently, the recent death of assassination of Shinzo Abe brings to the fore the Abenomics for which he stood. Closer on the heels of Paul Krugman, who stated that demand is the problem of Japanese economy, not the supply. Japanese economy from the 1990s asset fall has just learned that growth pessimism is the only factor influencing the psychology of the masses. Hence, they purchase less, they spend less. So, the deflation, which is the opposite of inflation, the consumers are not spending much money and public spending is not happening. This leads to deflation. Inflation happens when lots of money is there in the circulation in the economy and the consumers are having purchasing power. Deflation is the condition in which people are just not spending enough, fearing a growth reversal a growth reversal which will affect the economy. So Japanese consumers are spending very less. So they had to be taught a very good consumer behavior, and Japanese economy should expand. For that, Shinzo Abe introduced a Japanese Abenomics. Abenomics with the three arrows of growth strategy. One is easing of the money and expansion of the money supply, which Kuroda, the then the governor of Bank of Japan, exercised by increasing the money supply, the yen supply in the Japanese economy. And when the yen supply in the Japanese economy increased, the exporters were gaining windfall profits and they were happy. There was a short term growth in the consumption patterns of the general public in Japan. This was the kimono effect. In Japanese, it is called kimono effect. Kimono effect followed the Abenomics, the first arrow of the Abenomics, that is increasing the money supply. Then the second arrow was about public spending, increasing the public spending. This was also had a short-term effect. The unemployment reduced from 4.2% in 2012 when Shinzo Abe took over the power of Japan as the Prime Minister of Japan, and closing to 2.6% in 2021. Shinzo Abe then introduced the structural changes, increasing the corporate governance structure, the regulatory mechanism. All these were structural changes which were introduced, which had a very short effect. Then the taxation was one of the structural changes through which the inflation was targeted at 1.1 or 2%. Easing the money supply, and along with that, the taxation increase, the rates of taxation increase in the Japanese economy was aimed at structural change by Shinzo Abe. The Abenomics, the third pillar or the third arrow, aimed at increasing the inflation to 1 to 2%. Thereby, the taxation changes were having also a short-term effect. In 2016, Abe announced the deferral of the tax rate increase. It showed that the Abenomics was having a quiet demise. It was a colossal failure. It was a colossal failure, and it was going to die a closer demise. The Japanese again were in the grip of a very big black swan of deflation, and when the COVID struck in 2022, composing the miseries of Japanese people, Abe also aimed to make the Olympics in 2020 in Japan as the fourth arrow of Abenomics. Very bad luck to say that COVID came in between and it just dropped all intentions of conducting the Olympics Games in 2020, and it was put off and postponed. So all the four arrows of Abenomics had its colossal demise, and Abe naturally resigned. Now, the deflation still is the problem in Japan. The Global Gender Gap Index of 2022, introduced by the World Economic Forum, speaks a lot. The gender gap in India is at, and India stands at 135th rank out of 140 countries, and it has improved from 140th rank in 2021. India is having a women population of 66 crores, the half of its population. However, National Family Health Survey reveals certain startling information. The women at the age group of 18 to 49 are malnourished, having anemia, and they compose around 57% of the women population. And those who are having unemployment in the CMIE report, Central for Monitoring of Indian Industry Economy report, around 9% women are only having jobs. This is a very startling figure. If this startling figure continues, India will take another 132 years to bring gender gap parity. The gender parity, that is the parity between the men and women. This has to be washed out. Then, the national policy on disabilities has been released for public comments. It follows closer to the heels of the United Nations, where India signed the Convention on Persons with Disabilities and the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. The act, the policy states that the disabled persons should be provided better health, better education, better employment opportunities, and all amenities. However, what is the loophole or the lacuna in the policy statement is that even it has some lacuna in the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016 is that the role of disabled persons in the political sphere is not clearly spelled out. We can see that even the disabled persons are finding it very much difficult to vote in the constituencies in which they are living. The disabled persons census is not taken. Census is not taken is another feature. The census of disabilities per constituency is not taken. What happens is that it is not adequately planned. The election commission and state election commissioner is not adequately planning for the disabled persons for their smooth voting and exercise of the electoral system. This is a very big lacuna, and we find very less mention of disabled persons finding representation in the parliament and assemblies. Representation is the only way in which the voice of a marginalized section can be brought to the assembly and the parliament. And where it lacks, the disabled persons policy lacks in this aspect. So, this has to be looked into. Friends, I have come to the conclusion of today's Hindu and the Businessline editorial analysis. I will come tomorrow with some more interesting topics like this. Let us take bid adieu for the day, and bye. Good night.